Dawn crept over the Ardennes like a reluctant ghost, barely illuminating the war-scarred valley. The trees were skeletal, their branches wrapped in frost like brittle bones, and every farmhouse stood hollowed by artillery fire. The 3rd British Reconnaissance Company marched in wary silence, boots crunching over ice, breath drifting in pale clouds. Among them, Corporal Thomas Henley trudged with the quiet focus of someone who had learned to fear the forest's silence more than its sounds. He didn't look like the others, not as rugged, not as hardened, but his eyes were sharp, always scanning the treeline, always listening. Tucked inside his jacket was the object that had earned him months of mockery, a dented, worn tin whistle. Soldiers joked that he'd lost his mind, that he planned to charm the Germans like snakes. Tom never defended himself. The whistle wasn't a toy. It was a tool, one he hoped he'd never need. As the company approached a shattered mill house, Lieutenant Fraser ordered them to rest. Inside, smoke from a small fire curled through cracks in the ceiling. The men collapsed onto broken crates and sacks of ruined grain. McKenna, broad, loud, and perpetually amused, sauntered over to Tom. "Come on, Henley," he teased, snatching the whistle from Tom's pocket. "Play us a tune. Lighten the mood." Laughter erupted as McKenna blew an off-key screech that echoed in the cold chamber. Tom snatched it back, checking the dent with habitual care. "It's not for music," he murmured. "Then what is it for?" Tom didn't answer. Not because he was hiding a secret, but because he knew no one would believe him. When the break ended, the company moved toward a narrow path descending deeper into the forest. Fog rolled in like a living thing, coiling around their legs. Tom froze. A faint whistle drifted across the valley. 3 short notes. 1 long. The soldiers heard nothing but wind. Tom heard German patrol code, the kind he had learned months earlier from a captured officer in Tunisia. The pattern was unmistakable. Enemy scouts were nearby, closing in. He quickened his pace, catching up to Fraser. "Sir," Tom whispered urgently, "German patrol signals?" "Close. Very close." Fraser shook his head. "We follow the plan, Corporal." "But sir." "That's an order." Tom fell back, jaw tight. They weren't just walking into danger, they were marching straight into it. And the forest was no longer cold. It was listening. The fog thickened until the soldiers became silhouettes, phantoms drifting through a world stripped of color and sound. Tom's senses sharpened. Every rustle felt wrong, every shift of wind too deliberate. The forest seemed to lean inward, closing around them. Then it came. A rifle cracked from the ridge above. Loud, close, fatal. The lead scout fell before his scream even formed. "Ambush!" Sergeant Billings roared. The forest erupted. German gunfire raked the path, shredding bark, kicking snow into the air. The company scrambled behind rocks and fallen logs, returning fire blindly. Tom dove behind a stump, heart hammering. Bullets tore into the wood inches above his head. He had warned them. And now men were paying for being ignored. The German whistle signals echoed again, crisp, confident, commanding shifts, flanks, suppressive fire. Their coordination was flawless. Fraser slid beside Tom, gasping. "They've planned this. They're corralling us." Tom's mind raced. He heard a signal, high-pitched, descending, a hold position order. If he could imitate a higher authority command. "Sir," Tom whispered, gripping the whistle, "let me try something." Fraser hesitated only a moment. "Do it." Tom inhaled deeply, steadying trembling fingers, and blew a sequence perfectly mimicking a German officer's regroup and halt command. The effect was immediate. Gunfire wavered. Shouts of confusion rippled through the treeline. Some Germans retreated several steps, trying to confirm the order. Fraser seized the moment. "Smoke out. Fall back." The British threw grenades and a wall of white smoke rolled forward. Soldiers dragged the wounded and sprinted downhill. McKenna grabbed Tom's shoulder as they ran. "What the hell was that?" Tom clutched the whistle. "What you all laughed at." German gunfire resumed, angrier, more frantic, but the damage was done. Their coordinated assault had been disrupted. For the first time, the British had a sliver of advantage. They reached a bend in the terrain, taking temporary shelter. Fraser faced Tom breathless. You understand their signals? Yes, sir. And you can fake them. Tom nodded. Fraser exhaled, astonished. Then you may be the only thing standing between us and a massacre. Before Tom could reply, another distant whistle cut through the air, lower, sharper, unfamiliar. Tom's stomach sank. They're adjusting their codes. Fraser's eyes hardened. They know something's wrong. The German voices grew louder. The forest no longer listened. Haunted. The company pushed deeper into the trees, navigating difficult ground as exhaustion gnawed at their legs. Shadows stretched unnaturally in the dim afternoon light. Every soldier's nerves frayed like torn cloth. Tom listened constantly, but what he heard unsettled him. Sporadic whistles, shifting pitches, erratic commands. The Germans were reorganizing, abandoning traditional patterns. They're decentralizing, Tom told Fraser. Splitting into smaller, independent units. Which means? McKenna asked. That they're hunting, not patrolling. The realization chilled the squad more than the cold air. They reached a shallow ravine and descended into it for cover. Snow spilled down the walls like ash. But halfway through Tom froze. Tracks. Fresh ones. A single man. Light steps. A scout. Minutes ahead of them. Movement in the ravine, Tom whispered. We're being pre-tracked. Fraser cursed softly. Then we find another way. Before they could turn back, a flicker appeared above the ravine rim, then the crack of a rifle. Stone chips exploded beside Tom's face. Sniper. Cover. Billings yelled. The ravine became a death trap, high walls amplifying the echoes of gunfire. Tom crouched behind a rock, scanning the height. The sniper had elevation and invisibility. They couldn't run forward. Couldn't retreat. But they could misdirect. Sir, Tom said, sound bounces here. I can fool them again. Maybe. Fraser hesitated, then nodded sharply. Tom raised the whistle and blew a broken, urgent fallback command. The ravine walls multiplied the sound into chaotic echoes. German voices shouted in confusion. Another rifle cracked, but off target. Someone barked orders in panic. Move! Fraser commanded. The company surged through the ravine, stumbling, slipping, firing upward to suppress any returning shots. Once they emerged into thicker forest, McKenna grabbed Tom's arm. You're risking your life every time you blow that thing. Tom shook his head. I'm risking yours if I don't. Fraser approached, grim. They're catching on. The last whistle nearly didn't take. Tom knew. The Germans weren't stupid, and the forest wasn't large enough to hide both sides forever. As they pushed onward, a new sound echoed through the trees, a single gunshot. Then silence. Tom recognized the meaning instantly. They executed someone for issuing a false confirmation. McKenna paled. Jesus. They're eliminating doubts, Tom said. Tightening discipline. They won't trust signals anymore. Fraser looked at Tom. Then what do we trust? Tom scanned the forest and exhaled slowly. Instinct, he said. Terrain. And timing. He tucked the whistle back inside his jacket. It's no longer a trick, Tom whispered. It's a decoy, one we use sparingly. In the distance the Germans regrouped. The hunt had changed. But so had Tom. By dusk, the company reached a ridge overlooking a stretch of dense forest. A faint plume of smoke rose beyond it, British forces, perhaps a supply route. We're close, Fraser murmured. Maybe 30 minutes. But Tom listened again, kneeling in the snow. Boots. Soft, deliberate. Surrounding the ridge. They're forming a net, Tom whispered. We need elevation. They climb slower. Fraser pointed upward. Then climb. The ascent was brutal. Steep ice, loose rock, bitter wind. The soldiers struggled. Tom slipped twice, saved by McKenna's strong grip each time. Once atop the ridge, hope flickered. British helmets glinted in the distance. But it vanished instantly when a sharp whistle cut through the trees. German. Close. A squad burst from the shadows, rifles raised. Contact. Billings shouted. Gunfire erupted. The British fired back, scrambling toward defensive rocks. Tom ducked, firing control bursts. Snow erupted around him from incoming fire. A German machine gun opened up from below the ridge. Bullets chewed through the stone wall. McKenna shoved Tom to the ground just as a bullet grazed his sleeve. "We can't hold," McKenna yelled. Tom looked at the ridge path. Too narrow for a retreat under fire. Too exposed. "Unless, sir," Tom shouted to Fraser. "Force them into the choke point. The narrow pass." Fraser understood instantly. "Fall back to the pass. Go." The company retreated to the narrowest section of the ridge, a funnel no more than 3 meters wide. German soldiers pushed forward aggressively, confident in their numbers. Tom gripped the whistle. "You said they wouldn't fall for it again," McKenna yelled. "They won't," Tom said. "But I'm not talking to them this time." He blew a long, urgent British signal, one used only in extreme emergencies. Down the ridge the shadows moved. British soldiers appeared, convoy patrol troops responding to the distress call. Machine guns opened fire from the flanks, hammering the German line. The ridge shook with the roar of Allied firepower. Tom sagged in relief. But the Germans didn't retreat easily. They pushed until the last moment, refusing surrender, until finally they pulled back into the fog, guns silent. Fraser approached Tom, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Not German codes this time," Fraser said quietly. "But still a whistle that saved lives." Tom looked down at the dented metal. "It's just sound," he said softly. "But sound makes men move." And on that ridge, under falling snow, Tom realized something. He had turned a mocked object into a lifeline. But the day wasn't over yet. The wounded cried out, and the shadows still held danger. They needed to reach true safety, and soon. British reinforcements secured the ridge, dragging wounded soldiers to cover while medics worked frantically. The forest below was silent again, the kind of silence that remained after violence, heavy, echoing, lingering like smoke. Tom leaned against a tree, breathing hard. His hands shook, not from fear but from exhaustion and cold. The tin whistle dangled from his fingers, glinting faintly in the dying light. McKenna approached, rubbing his bruised shoulder. "You know," he said awkwardly, "I used to think that whistle was the dumbest thing in Europe." Tom let out a tired laugh. "I didn't disagree. But," McKenna shifted, embarrassed. "You saved us." Repeatedly. "I was wrong." Tom smiled gently. "That's war. Sometimes the ridiculous becomes essential." Fraser approached with a medic. "We're moving to the convoy station. You able to walk?" Tom nodded, though his legs trembled. They began the slow march toward friendly lines. The snow eased, replaced by drifting flakes illuminated by lantern light. The forest, once menacing, looked strangely peaceful now. Halfway through the march, Tom paused, turning back toward the ridge. The forest that had tried to swallow them whole seemed to watch him, silent, cold, unchanged. Fraser stepped beside him. "What are you thinking?" Tom held up the whistle. "That so much death can hinge on so little sound. A pattern. A pitch. A trick of breath." Fraser nodded. "War amplifies everything." Tom tucked the whistle into his pocket. "It's strange. I carried it because it reminded me of home. Something simple. Human. And today," Fraser said, "it became something else." When they reached the convoy post, a small fortified clearing with British soldiers stationed around vehicles and supply crates, the surviving men of the 3rd Recon Company received blankets, rations, and medical care. Tom sat beside a fire, gripping the whistle. For the first time in hours he wasn't listening for danger. Only for quiet. One by one, soldiers gathered around him, Billings, McKenna, even Fraser standing a few steps away. Someone murmured, "Give us a tune, Henley." This time there was no mockery. Only gratitude. Tom lifted the whistle to his lips. He didn't play a signal. He didn't play deception. He didn't play survival. He played a soft melody, gentle, warm, haunting. A tune from childhood. A lullaby from a world untouched by war. The forest listened. The soldiers listened. Even the night seemed to soften. When the final note faded, McKenna wiped his eyes discreetly. Fraser spoke softly. "You may not want medals, Tom, but after today you deserve them. Tom looked into the fire. Metals rust, he said. Peace doesn't. The wind shifted, carrying the last echo of the whistle across the snow. A simple sound. A fragile hope. A reminder that even in war humanity survives in the smallest breaths.